Hey everyone, welcome to our webinar this morning. My name is Chee and I'm the head of SEO at Trustpilot, and I'll be your host this morning. Thank you for joining our webinar titled SEO and the Rise of AEO, Why Voice Search Matters. Sitting next to me, we have SEO expert Jason Barnard from Calicube Pro, and we'll be talking about how voice search will affect the SEO landscape in the months and years to come. With AEO being new, this presents opportunities for early adopters to benefit. And together we will share tips and insights in preparing for answer engine optimization. At the end of the webinar, we will share with you an AEO white paper written by Trustpilot. In the white paper, we have opinions from Jason and another head of SEO from Canadian e-commerce store Essence on this topic. Jason, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Hi, thank you, Chee. I'm an SEO and SEA consultant, author and conference speaker. I started SEO when I was making online cartoons for kids, and that was a pretty successful website. We ended up with 1 million visits a month from Google, so I segued into SEO. I live and work in France, working for international clients, and I work on Calicube Pro, which is a brand authority measurement system, and we investigate how Google learns, how Google decides whether a company is credible or not, and we look into the knowledge graph.
Cool, thanks Jason. So I'm Chee, I'm the head of SEO at Trustpilot. I've been an SEO for more than 18 years now, with the last 2.5 at Trustpilot. I'm responsible for the SEO of all our online properties, specializing in technical SEO, on large-scale websites, and I ensure we have strong technical foundations. So when Google comes in and crawls our site, they can index the pages as efficiently as possible. We have a great team where we can build things really quick and fast, and we're always pushing the boundaries with tech. Also work with the product teams on the integrations. Some of you might be Trustpilot customers already, and you may be familiar with the SEO trust boxes, where you can implement them on your site and you get rich snippets for your pages. So before I start, I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that you can ask questions in your control panel. On the right-hand side, there's a questions pane. If you have questions or comments during the webinar, please ask away. We will attempt to answer as many questions as we can. At the end of the webinar, if we run out of time, we'll be sure to follow them up with you by email. So if you have questions, just ask them. So a little bit about Trustpilot. We're an online review platform. We help consumers make informed purchasing decisions on our consumer site, trustpilot.com. We allow brands to showcase their reputation and engage with their customers through custom reviews. Reviews are an excellent form of social proof. They can be used on websites, on email, on marketing materials in both print and digital. And we've seen a lot of companies really succeed by utilizing reviews in their marketing. Jason, would you like to tell us a bit more about Calicube? Yeah,
a few quick words about Calicube. We're experts in brand authority, as I mentioned earlier on. For us, brand authority is the future of what we now know as SEO, as it evolves into answer engine optimization. From now on, I will call that AEO. And we help brands to build a future where AEO is king, and understanding and credibility drive search marketing, which is a lovely little phrase. In 2017, we analyzed 25,000 brands, something like 10 million search results, to try and figure out how Google understands, how it learns, and how it evaluates credibility. So now we've become specialists in measuring brand authority and helping clients build their brand authority for the future, where, as I said, AEO is king.
Cool, thanks Jason. So we're going to move through the presentation really quickly. We're going to touch on why voice matters. So voice assistant usage is on the rise. Research from Google tells us that 40% of the British population use voice search daily. This compares to 25% 4 years ago. Another piece of research found that engagement with Alexa, which is Amazon's voice assistant, and Cortana, Microsoft's own voice assistant, both increased over 300% in a year. So these numbers are pretty significant, and it goes to show that voice assistant usage is growing fast. Jason, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and I'd like to make an analogy between the move from desktop to mobile. That was phenomenally fast, from something like 10% in 2011 to 50% in 2014, something even bigger now, maybe 60%. The move from mobile to voice will be similar, probably not as fast because the uptake of voice has been a little bit slower, but the change will be even bigger because it changes the nature of the way we search. And all of these three platforms, desktop, mobile, and voice, will coexist, but they will all evolve towards the idea of providing a definitive answer to each individual user at a given moment, what Google calls micro moments. So although we will still have desktop search and we still have mobile search and the top results will still matter, we're ending up with a situation where all these motors, Google, Bing, are trying to give us a definitive answer where we no longer need to actually choose for ourselves. It's important to note that Alexa and Cortana, are powered by Bing. So although today Google is the really big player and it's the one we all think about, Bing is likely to make quite a comeback. So we need to actually think about motors, answer engines, rather than just thinking about Google as we do today.
Cool. So we're going to have a poll. We'll have to know we'll have to know when you last used voice search. It can be on any device, mobile, tablet, iPad, Alexa, Google Home, etc. So please choose an answer on a screen that best fits, and we'll share the results shortly. So when did you last use voice search? And the options are today, this week, this month, within the last 12 months, or never.
And if anyone wants to cheat, the answer is this morning. No, that was for me. I'm answering this morning. I used it this morning to find where Trustpilot's office was and to get my route.
And I also used it this morning as well to find out if the trains are running on time.
We're trying to read the results on a small screen.
Okay, so
it's pretty evenly split.
Yeah, which is very interesting.
So very few people, it would seem, used it today. So you and I are in the minority, Chee, and the majority seem to be this week and this month, with a quarter of people who've never used voice search.
Okay.
Which is kind of surprising because although one associates voice search with the voice assistants, on mobile phones you have voice search and it's been around for quite a long time. And on desktop as well, you can talk to your computer. On Google, there is the little microphone that you can click on. I started using that a few years ago just to try it out and have fun. So 25%, the 25% who haven't, maybe you could try this afternoon.
Cool. So just moving on. So following on from what Jason was saying, so we're really going to see in the near future how voice will affect SEO and the way how search engines work. Here we can see the differences between the voice query and the regular search query. So a normal regular query, normally carried out on your mobile device, tablet or desktop, is often very short, more specific, and often standalone statements. For example, best Android phone or email marketing software. It's very succinct, usually consists of about 3 to 5 words and gets straight to the point. Voice search queries take advantage of the fact that we're saying our query. So they tend to be longer, usually posed as questions. Depending on what you're searching for, they're often tied to a location. So you would ask something like, where is the nearest pizza place? Or where's the best coffee shop around me? Google needs to take into consideration your location in order to return the most relevant results to whatever service that you're looking for. And this matters a lot, not only for location-based searches, but whenever you're searching for anything. So if you're looking for an Android phone, your voice query might be, what's the best Android phone for £1,000? What is the best Android phone for my needs? I can rely on Google to return a price, a make or model, and hopefully a Google Pixel. However, if Jason were to ask Google the same question, Google will return very different results to him. This is based on Google knowing who I am, what my habits are from my past searches, and past behavior on Google products to give me the correct answer for that particular query. Is there anything you want to add, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very important point. The fact that now increasingly Google is making the results specific to each individual user. Even now, when you search on a desktop, you will get specific results that are based on your search history, your location, your language, and so on and so forth. And today, you will choose from those answers, whereas tomorrow, Google will present you with the right answer for you at that moment. Once again, the micro moments, and that's a very important word. Google is concentrating on individual users at a given time, in a given situation, in a given context. What is the correct answer? And we're saying correct, we're saying definitive, correct, right, perfect answer for me. I do not need to choose. Google knows what's best for me, which is slightly scary, but I suspect we're all going to get very comfortable with that, and we're going to end up trusting Google or Bing if we're using Alexa. So as we move forward, we're looking for the right answer. So companies need to make sure if they are the correct answer for me, that Google can present me. Now the next slide is going to look at how voice queries are different from regular queries, and also how the results are very different. Chee.
So here's a visual representation of a search end result as an answer result. On the left-hand side, you see a familiar Google search results page for the search query best contact lens. You see the normal shopping ads, Google AdWords, and the normal 10 blue links. And you have a lot of options to choose from. Results are differ due to personalization, due to your location. Keywords are normally higher volume, but with low to medium intent. When it comes to answer engines, you really just have one answer. If the initial answer is wrong, then there may be options to provide more. Often these key phrases have lower search volume, but much higher intent. Jason?
Yeah, I think the very important point there, Chee, was specific. Queries are becoming more and more specific, and the answers are becoming more and more specific. And it's very important to bear in mind that if Google is to give a specific answer, it needs very specific, detailed information in order to be able to present it. I mean, the example of a pizza, if somebody types, "I'd like a pizza," easy. If they say, "I would like the cheapest pizza in the area," Google needs to know what the prices of the pizzas are in the pizza shops around. If they say, "I want pepperoni pizza," it would be really helpful if Google knew the menus. And if you ask for pepperoni pizza and it knows that one pizzeria does it but isn't sure the other one does, it will present the one it knows offers pepperoni pizza. That's the idea of specifics. So we're now looking at a very different strategy to SEO. Whereas SEO, you're aiming to rank on the top page. In AEO, to get to that top spot, Google needs to understand and be sure it's understood what it is you're offering. Specifics.
Cool. Chee. So to give a little more foundational knowledge about what AEO is and how it's changing things, we're going to move into the next section, the shifting landscape of search engines. So with AEO, there's some rules to note, and we're going to some of these in a bit more depth later. So position 0 is a new page 1. When it comes to answer engines, there is no page 1. When you're making a voice query, you're only going to get one result. So when you're optimizing for AEO, that's the mindset you should be working towards. Communication and credibility are very important. This not only applies to AEO, but SEO in general. We'll get into that a little bit later, why credibility and communication is so important. Localization is key. That is something we talked about before. If your voice query does not include local intent, near me or by me, Google, by knowing who you are, is already tailoring results to you based on your location. And then AEO requires a strategy, which sounds like an obvious statement. SEO can be seen as a tactics-based approach where you're taking specific tactics to improve your online presence, but AEO will require a strategy. So it's more than just about specific tactics, but more about the holistic vision in how you approach AEO. Jason?
Yeah, position zero, I think, important to bear in mind, is the definitive answer for a given user at a given time, at a given place, in a given context, i.e. a micro moment. And for Google to even consider giving you as the answer, the correct answer, in position zero, it has to understand you and your offer, which is what I was saying a little bit earlier on. Now imagine with the pepperoni pizza, it's understood that 2 pizzerias offer that pepperoni pizza. It will send you to the one that it feels is the most credible. And that depends on the its judgment of how people have perceived you. And we'll come back to that a little bit later on. So we end up with this idea: Google needs to understand you in order to even consider you. And once it's considered you, it has to believe that you are credible in order to actually offer you as the answer. So we're looking, as you said, Chee, at a new optimization strategy. And luckily, it's the same for everybody, which is really good news. It involves building understanding and building credibility. And just to be very, very clear, we're not saying only optimize for answer engines. You must continue to optimize for search engines, because desktop and mobile will continue to exist alongside the answer engines. However, starting today to build for answer engine optimization is vital in order to survive in a world where voice will take a bigger part of the market. Chee.
Cool. So I'm going to hand over to Jason to go through a few of the rules in a bit more detail. So beginning with communicating to educate. This is really the foundation of AEO, and SEO is really heading this way. So over to you, Jason.
Yeah, I think what we often fail to really understand is that information on the web is very fragmented. It's often inaccurate, and it's not practical at all for a machine to digest. I was developing some HTML5, some semantic HTML5, in order to better present information to Google. It's astonishing how differently different websites are coded. The HTML is very different. It's very difficult for a machine to actually collect the information and understand it. Google has managed to accumulate a vast amount of information, line after line after line, billions and billions and billions of lines of data, but it's having enormous trouble organizing the data, confirming its veracity, and understanding the relationships between different entities, an entity being a company, a place, a person. So we have the data, it has the data, sorry, but it does not have understanding. So our job on a very small micro level is to ensure that Google understands. If I want it to understand my company, I have to give it the information. I give it the information, and then it's up to Google to go and check that what I'm saying is true. So the strategy of AEO starts with the idea of making sure that Google understands. Now, HTML5, I mentioned it earlier, is a very, very, very powerful method. Basically, it divides the page up into sections, and each section has a specific role that is identified in a standard manner. So Google can ignore the header, ignore the footer, ignore additional information, and it can concentrate on the heart of the content. Schema markup, structured markup, incredibly important, because it's basically presenting the information that the page contains in a format that Google can really easily digest, and it can be confident that it's understood. As I said, you give it the information, you're the best source for information about yourself. As long as you don't lie, you're fine. Google will then go out and check it. So if you lie, it will catch you out. We're in a situation where simply telling it what we do without going into the idea of saying how wonderful we are. We just say what we do. We give all the details we can. Coming back to the pizzas, if we do pepperoni pizza, it's a really good idea to tell Google we do pepperoni pizza, because one day somebody will search for pepperoni pizza, and that one client will come to you and not to your competitor. So start by thinking about how you're communicating with Google. Start by saying on your site what it is you do in detail, accurately. Google will go and check it. Once it's understood you, it can offer you as a potential answer. Chee.
So to quickly summarize what Jason is saying, the most important point is it's the company's responsibility to make sure they're leveraging tactics, make sure search engines understand what you're saying. This can be in the form of providing meaning schema.org structured data markup to help search engines understand what you're trying to say. Good semantic HTML is obvious. We can see from the search results page the brand Lens Direct, which are a Trustpilot customer. They get to enrich snippets for one of their pages, which means they're doing a good job of what they're offering to Google. So moving on to the next slide, we're going to be talking about credibility, which ensures that Google is presenting you for the right results. Once you've ticked the boxes for some of the tactics on the previous slides, how do you ensure Google picks you to answer that query? I'll let Jason explain that to you.
Yeah, I mean, once Google's understood you, what you do, credibility will give them confidence that you can actually provide the solution to the user. I think it's important to remember that when somebody asks a question, whether they type it or whether they speak it, they're asking for a solution to a problem or the answer to a question. And Google's aim and Bing's aim is to give them access to that answer or that solution as quickly as possible. So their aim is to put the best at the top. So once it's understood that you are able to provide the answer or the solution, if it's confident that you're a credible solution, it will put you at the top. We use the term brand authority. That's replacing domain authority. If anybody has studied SEO a little bit, they'll know that domain authority is based on links. It's a very simplistic and out-of-date idea. It was very useful for many years, but the idea that Google only relies on links today is false. Google relies on links, obviously, still, but also mentions. As long as it's understood who you are, it can link a mention of your brand name to you. And what we're now starting to call is linkless links, which is a little bit silly, but says what it says. And then positive feedback from clients, obviously review platforms, but also social media. A buzz around your brand, if the buzz is positive, that's obviously a very strong signal to Google. From what I understand, Google manages to crawl about 30% of Facebook. So it doesn't get it all, but it gets a good part of it, and it gets a good idea of what people are saying about you, how positive it is. So understanding plus credibility gives brand authority. If you don't improve your brand authority, your mid to long-term AEO strategy is doomed to failure. Chee.
Cool. Just to expand on the third point around links and mentions. So links is the SEO tactic to improve your credibility, whereby you get a physical link from an external site. However, with Google's algorithm, they're able to work out your credibility from brand mentions on other sites, which can make a difference to your SEO and AEO. This means reviews come into play, social media comes into play. Even there's no link associated, if you are taking the time and effort to communicate in the right way. So I just wanted to bring your attention back to the Lens Direct screenshot. The most eye-catching element there is the nearly 5-star ratings they have, and them having over 1,400 reviews, which is quite a lot. And this brings us on to the next point. So this is something we recently added, as there has been new research that shows that quantity of reviews actually matter a lot, not only for search engines, but also to consumers as well. So consumers are now really just valuing how many times a company has served any consumer. And we're seeing that by consumers, they prefer a company with a lower rating with more reviews than a company with high ratings with fewer reviews. And we've seen this behavior replicated in search results as well.
Yeah, I think one thing you just mentioned that kind of struck me was you said consumers. And although we're talking about an AEO strategy, obviously what being at the top for Google is very, very important, but also consumers are very, very important, and reviews offer this great opportunity to show how good we are. But I'd also like to expand that towards mentions and links. They're very, very, very powerful. Reviews are obviously powerful. Mentions are very powerful as long as Google has understood who you are. So we come back to this idea of communicating to Google who you are. And make sure, or try to encourage mentions in a relevant context, on relevant sites, and make sure they're positive. Obviously, your credibility depends on all of this feedback being positive. which brings us on to the next slide. Chee.
So we've talked about how SEO is changing and AEO is changing. Okay, now what can I do about it? So we still want to continue to stress the value of SEO, even though AEO does matter more and more every day, but that doesn't mean forget about SEO. Companies should still be using SEO tactics and think about AEO as they work on their SEO strategy. For example, having great semantic HTML, alt tags for images, we're communicating to Google in the right way, providing structured data markup so machines can understand context of our content better, building links, subsequently getting brand mentions. So a brand mention from the BBC website can be extremely powerful and positive for you. So before I kick off to the next section, I'm going to have another poll. We'd like to know if you have been already looking at strategies for voice search. As such, please answer the poll on the screen and we'll share the results shortly. Have you added any features to your website specifically for voice search? Yes, no, or not sure are the options.
And it looks like the no's have won. The no's have won by quite a large majority, 3/4.
Yeah.
Say that they haven't yet implemented anything for AEO, so perhaps that's why you're here. So we're now going to move on with Chee to what can you actually do, so we can pull that no from 3/4 down to none.
So yeah, this brings us to the next slide. For the purpose of AEO, because this is new and we're entering uncharted territory, you have to experiment and experiment. While Google voice search is still in its infancy, Google's still doing a lot of figuring it out, and it doesn't always get 100% right with AEO. However, companies should be working on identifying key phrases and key voice searches that are relevant to you and that are working well, and make sure that you put yourself in a position where you can do things quickly. Typically, small to medium-sized businesses can move a lot faster than enterprise-level businesses. That means you can capitalize on AEO much faster than large corporations.
Sure. Interestingly, the AEO tends to give an advantage to niche markets and local businesses. Smaller improvements will give much bigger results. So if you're in a niche market or you're a local business, this can be very, very beneficial. I'm sorry to come back to the pizza example again, but the pizza business who has communicated both what it does, what it offers, and its credibility is going to benefit greatly from a good AEO strategy, especially in local search. Thank you for the clap. Next slide, sorry.
So just moving on to this slide, there's some very good tips to improve your AEO as well as your SEO. Jason, would you like to run through?
Yeah, sure. You can communicate to educate. But this is my favorite topic at the moment, semantic HTML5 and structured markup. Semantic HTML5 is very, very, very powerful, surprisingly so. Fairly simple to implement. If you don't know what semantic HTML5 is, I'll explain very quickly. HTML is what allows the navigator, the computer, to actually show the content. It's the design, it's the layout. Semantic HTML5 indicates the role that each part of that layout plays in the page. So a header, a footer, a navigation, additional information, and the main content. I've implemented that for several clients, and we always see a slight boost in rankings in the short term. So it's not only long term, it's also short term advantage. Schema markup is simply the content of your page presented in a manner that Google can understand in its native language, if you like. Once again, with my clients, when we implement it, we get short term gains, as well as making sure that we're ready for the answer engines when they take over the search environment. So, and there, so if you're interested in reading more, I've written a few articles on SEMrush. Just search for SEMrush, go onto their blog. There's a few articles there specifically about semantic HTML5 and schema markup. Then we move on to credibility. third parties who confirm that you're credible. The word that I think is important here is trusted. If Google trusts the third party and the third party says that you're good, or that you're credible, or that you provide a good service, it will obviously take that much more seriously than if it doesn't trust. Review platforms, some are more trustworthy than others. Then mentions, links, reviews, feedback, buzz, as long as it's relevant and positive, that's all obviously very important. And we were talking about earlier on saying what we do, informing Google what we do. There's also the idea of confirmation, which I mentioned, but I didn't go into detail. Wikidata is a very important source for Google. Wikidata is basically the database behind Wikipedia. Google will go and check in Wikidata, and in fact, ironically, you can actually add yourself to Wikidata. So you can confirm yourself on a trusted third party. Crunchbase, if you haven't heard of it, it's an American site. Same thing, Google trusts it, and same thing, you can add yourself. Government sites, typically, very trusted. Business associations, people forget that. In your niche, if we come back to the word niche, you don't need an article on the BBC. You could get an article on a website that's specifically about your business. Pizza Monthly, for example. And niche brands, other brands within your niche. So you don't need to think big. You don't need to think BBC. You don't need to think ITV or The Guardian. You can look to niche brands who confirm and credibilize what it is you're doing. Once again, we're not saying drop SEO. We're saying that it changes. And it changes when we're looking at answer optimization. And SEO tactics serve your answer optimization. Valid HTML is very important for SEO. And it actually simply makes communication better. It means you're communicating more clearly with Google. The quality of your content and the fact that that content is relative, very important. Once again, you're communicating. You're communicating what it is your brand message is, what it is you do, and that you're an expert. The site speed would seem to not be related, but it is, because a website that is fast is a website run by a brand that is credible. Alt tags, once again, we're communicating. When you put alt tags on your images, you're communicating with Google. The more you can communicate, the better. Links, obviously, building credibility. There are other tactics too. We'll look at those shortly. Chee.
So, yeah, there's really good points there, Jason. And now we can talk about brand authority, credibility, and understanding. And putting it all together, we'll let you talk a little bit about what you offer. Before getting into reviews, trusted third parties, and why that helps with SEO and AEO.
Yeah, brand authority. As I said earlier, understanding plus credibility equals brand authority. Google can really only apply those credibility signals that it gets, the mentions, the reviews, the links, if it understands your brand, who you are, and what you do. You want to communicate and you want to protect and promote your brand. It's the single most important thing in AEO and in SEO. But in SEO, it tended to get a little bit forgotten by a lot of people. So communicating around your brand, protecting it and promoting it is incredibly important. All the efforts that you do here, everything you manage to do successfully in building your brand authority will help improve your other marketing channels. And with Kalicube Pro, we wanted to understand how Google learns and how it assesses credibility. So we asked it. Basically, what we did is we threw search queries at it, as I said, something like 10 million results, and saw what it threw back for brand searches around brands, to see how well it's understood and how credible it thinks the brand is. Then we also asked its knowledge graph. Its knowledge graph actually has an API, so we can see what's in the knowledge graph and what isn't in the knowledge graph. And on Kalicube Pro, there's a little tool where you can play and you can type a name in. If you type in Britney Spears, it shows you what it knows about Britney Spears, and it gives you a relevancy score, which is basically how confident it is that it's understood who that person is. She gets a relevancy score of about 1,000. If you type in Trustpilot, you get a relevancy score of about 30. Companies tend to have lower relevancy scores in the knowledge graph than human beings. But that's because human beings tend to be more how can I put it more? They communicate in a single manner. People talk about Britney Spears within a specific context much more than they do about Trustpilot, for example. Google tends to be more confident about rock stars, film stars, politicians, because the information is very much more, much better presented in general. So now we've built by asking Google what it thinks about brands, what it understands about brands. We've built up a great understanding about answer engine optimization, and more importantly, how brands can get ahead in this field. See. Oh, sorry, it's me again. About measuring, in fact, I've already mentioned this. Basically, we looked at understanding. We looked at what the presence in the knowledge graph is, talking about Britney Spears, the relevancy of the results that Google returns for the brand, and Google's capacity to categorize. Categorizing is one of the hardest things to do. It seems very easy, but once you try and categorize at a large scale, it's very difficult. And Google's capacity to do that is surprisingly good. The credibility, we measure the quality of the results that Google sends back for brand searches, the reviews Google returns for the brand opinion searches. So if you search for brand plus review, see what comes up. If it's good, that's obviously great. If it's bad, ask yourself why. Is it because your service is bad, or is it that Google has misunderstood? If it's misunderstood, correct it. And then last but not least, of course, the level and the sentiment of the buzz around the brand. Obviously, chatter on Twitter is very, very important. Facebook, but also press, keeping it positive. We measure what people are saying about you, and what Google perceives people to be saying about you, which is more important still. Thank you. Oh, it's me again. Here are some examples. The Yahoo, for example, obviously very well understood, very good understanding score. It's managed to categorize it in internet and telecom. Warner Brothers, interestingly enough, media brands tend to get better scores than others. And that's principally because of things like IMDb. Very early on in the internet, fans and sites like IMDb started to categorize things. And as I said earlier on, categorization is possibly the most important thing for understanding. If you can categorize, you can start to understand. If you can't categorize, it means you haven't yet started to understand. Trustpilot gets a pretty good score. It doesn't look very good, 54. But in fact, 54 is, as we will see on the next slide, very, very good score. Google's still starting to understand. If we move on to the next slide, we'll see just how little it has understood. What we can see here is the distribution of brands in each slice of the percentiles. So as you can see, the majority between 10 and 30%. Trustpilot there, we're up in the 50 to 60, which is 2%, a very good understanding. What we can see here is that there's a great deal for Google yet to learn. So the great opportunities are there. If you can get yourself to be understood by Google, you get a very big advantage over your competition, and Google is desperate to understand. Google really wants to understand. It's not a question of cheating or gaming the system. It's a question of Google wants to understand. If you can explain to it what it is you do and that you're credible at what you do, it's very happy. So once again, the onus is on brands to communicate what they do, how they do it, the details of what they do, and ensure that Google understands that they're credible. I have my clients, when I ask them, I say, are you credible? They all say, oh, yes, of course I am. And that's the problem, is that they've got a very biased point of view about themselves. And when you say, prove it, they struggle. But my clients love me. I get all these emails, and you say, but Google cannot see that. In order to prove that you're credible, you have to make sure that that information is available online and that Google has seen it and Google has understood it. And one thing I think that is powerful that people don't necessarily think to do is that if somebody's talked about you on a website, in a newspaper article, on The Guardian, for example, there is nothing to stop you actually writing to the person who's done it, asking them to change what they've written if they've written something inaccurate. or if they could present it better, or if they could present it more in the way that you wish it to present it. And a lot of the time people will do that. They will change what they've written. And if you can manage to get out there and make sure that the information, the positive feedback about yourself is coherent with what it is you're saying, Google's going to understand you better. It's going to be more convinced by who you are, what you're doing, and that you're credible at it. So I encourage you to go out and actually, somewhere it's press relations. We've gone away from link building, and we're now back into press relations. We've gone away from creating content for search engines and more creating content to create context and to create credibility in what it is we're doing. And I find that incredibly encouraging, because we're coming back to a world that's more human. And it's more about traditional marketing strategies, which I'm sure you'll appreciate. Hannah. Next.
Great. And really all of that shows you is that this territory is still new, not only for brands, but Google as well. So if you're asking yourself, okay, how do I increase my brand authority? How do I let Google know who I am and know that I'm credible? I would say reviews is one of them. So we're going to be talking about the intersection between reviews and search engines. So when we're talking about communication and understanding, reviews provide benefits on both sides. When you're putting reviews on your site, you're communicating to Google what it is you do and who you are and how you provide values to consumers. And reviews themselves, if they're on third-party sites like ourselves, Trustpilot, those are those positive mentions that we talked about before. That will add to your brand reputation.
Sure. And I advise my clients systematically to get a paid review platform, one that's accepted by Google, simply because, first of all, you get your stars in the search results, and as an SEO consultant, I know that helps click-through rate, and increased click-through rate improves your ranking. But also, I do add some AdWords, save money on AdWords. You get a higher click-through rate, your quality score goes up, Google will give you that top spot for less money. And the last one, which is my favorite, is that in the long term, it builds your brand authority, and that increased brand authority is going to help you in the long term. So reviews get you short-term benefits, but also long-term benefits. Chee.
So if you're asking yourself, okay, yes, I want reviews. Yes, I'm looking for third-party reviews. Then you have the question, which review platforms are best for SEO and AEO? Jason has carried out some independent research on his own to find that answer. And this is on the next slide.
Yeah, I used SEMrush, who I mentioned earlier on, and measured the relative SEO strength of different platforms in the UK and America. On the left, you have the UK, and on the right, you have America. So we'll just look at the UK one. I measured the amount of traffic, the number of keywords, the SEO rank, and the value. Now, the value of the traffic is how much advertisers would be willing to pay for that amount of traffic. And what we see here, obviously, is Trustpilot is way ahead of the field. The other platforms are credible and are absolutely fine. The study here was to see, if you want an SEO boost, which is the platform that will bring you that SEO boost? And the answer was very clearly Trustpilot. The other advantages of review platforms I haven't studied as yet. The interesting thing that I found with my clients is some of them take different platforms such as verified reviews, but when a client takes Trustpilot, I can almost always guarantee that when you do a search on their brand name, Trustpilot will come up on that first page. And very interesting for them is that they then own two places on the first page, their own site and the Trustpilot site. That tends not to be true with the other platforms. So enough about how wonderful Trustpilot is. I'll pass over to Chee.
So I'm going to briefly mention why Trustpilot does really well when it comes to SEO. We have a highly credible consumer site with high SEO authority. Our integrations allow brands to communicate to search engines in the right way. Just go back to the Lens Direct example from a few slides ago. They implemented our SEO trust box on their site, That gave them rich snippets in Google search results, and based on their consumer reviews being collected on Trustpilot. A mention of your brand on Trustpilot can improve your brand authority. On Moz, a popular search engine blog, they list Trustpilot as at 197th out a list of 500 global websites. And we have decent levels of traffic, and know that consumers keep their revisiting the site often. So a little bit more about Trustpilot by numbers. So we're nearly approaching 40 million reviews on our website. We get over 72 million visitors a year. I believe that would grow maybe 30–40% this year. And this is why we have strong brand credibility and authority. Jason, do you want to talk about Kalicube before we move on to the questions?
Sure. Kalicube in numbers. Very quickly, you can see the numbers. I've been working on that for a little over a year, counting it in days, because each day is a struggle. We've got 27,000 brands. I added 4,000 famous people yesterday. So I'll have some results for the brand authority or the e-reputation of 4,000 people sometime in February. The figure of 10 million Google results, that's 1.5 million SERPs, which is actually 15 million, about 15 million results, the actual results. And all of that data, phenomenally large amount of data, we've been sorting through it, figuring out, analysing and ranking brands by authority. And as I said earlier on, we've realised that Google has a very good basic understanding of almost everybody, i.e. can pretty much always put the correct site at the top of the rankings for any given brand name. But it cannot provide additional information, rich information, knowledge graphs, rich site links. People also asked around that brand if you move even slightly away from the brand, which is where I'm saying the understanding is not sufficiently deep for the majority of brands, and why that understanding, what we perceive to be a great understanding is actually a very basic understanding. And I'm very, 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 very keen to improve that understanding, and I can't mention enough how important HTML5 and semantic and schema markup are. Please do go onto the SEMrush blog and read the articles. They're worth reading simply because it points out how simple it is to do. So there you go. And if you want to get in contact with me, please do follow me on Twitter. Over to Chee for the questions.
So now we're going to be answering some of your questions. So one of them is it a must to have schema markup for voice search?
It's not a must, but it's a help. I would say if you've got a very simple page and good HTML5, semantic HTML5 structured markup, perhaps with some HTML5 content markup, an abbreviation, for example, you can easily rank well. If you add schema markup, you will confirm to Google that it's correctly understood what it is you're saying, so it will improve your chances, but it is not strictly necessary, no.
I mean, I'm a strong believer in providing as much information and signals to Google as possible. If you leave them to figure it out themselves, there's more chance that they get it wrong.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think when I talk to my clients, often they imagine that Google has understood everything, and we have that impression, but it's not true. It's understood basically a great deal. It has an enormous amount of information, and it's begging you to structure that information and confirm what it thinks it's understood, or provide additional information, as we said earlier on, detailed information. Think about that pepperoni pizza. The more detail it has in structured markup, the more it will understand and the more it is confident it is understood. So schema markup, very good idea, not strictly necessary to get position 0.
Cool. Another question is, how can I track the use of voice search to my website versus other types of search?
Very good question. At the moment, there isn't any way to do that. Google Search Console would be the immediate place to go, but it doesn't separate voice search from anything else yet. It probably will at some point, but don't expect it too soon. What you can do is check out the longer queries. You can imagine that voice search will tend to be longer queries. So if I were trying to do that today, I would go to Search Console, export the information, and sort the words, the query, sorry, by the number of words in the query, and take the longer ones, 4, 5, 6 or more, and say that was voice search. However, it's unlikely you will ever get all the information, simply because Google does not give search volumes and in Search Console for very specific queries where there are only very few searches. What they say is that is likely to give you too much information about individual people. So for the moment, very difficult. You won't really know, and maybe in the future they will split the search data in Search Console into voice and non-voice. Mm-hmm. Let's hope so.
Yeah, and I think just a few months back, Google, I think it was Jonathan Mew, the search analyst over there. I think he put out there that webmasters should maybe email Google. I think you can feedback to them in Search Console and asking, what's the reason why you want access to voice searches? And pretty obvious as a marketeer. And maybe if enough people feedback to Google, they will enable it in Search Console.
I'll go and do that this afternoon.
Cool. So another question, what are the best tools to measure the brand authority of my website? Well,
I'm completely biased, but the best tool is Kalicube Pro. You can actually go on to Kalicube Pro, surf around. We've got, as I said, 27,000 brands, and you can check out the brand authority for those 27,000 and check out their ranking in their category. We've used Google's categorization. So basically what we've done is measured Google, and we're presenting you with what Google thinks, how Google understands, and some of the information is surprisingly inaccurate. The categorizations can be a bit weird sometimes. Other than that, I don't actually know if there are any tools for measuring brand authority. I know that Moz does domain authority, but as I said earlier on, that really doesn't count for very much anymore. Sorry, Moz.
Okay. So we've got a couple of minutes left, and this will be the last question. If you have posted questions, we'll get back to you at the end of the day, maybe tomorrow, most likely tomorrow. So the final question is, how can I measure how well my website is being understood by Google?
Well, it's a very similar question to the last one. Okay. So we can say Kalicube Pro again, because we do actually split brand authority into understanding and credibility. And we give that score, as you saw on the slide earlier on, both the understanding and the credibility score. So you can check out both. And there is one more question. What percentage of searches do I think are voice search? 5.5. I don't know. I think Chee had some figures on that.
Yeah, I think in the white paper, I think there's an estimate. I think it's like maybe 5 to 10% of search queries are voice. But it is increasing, and we know that Google's not sharing that data yet. But when we do have access to that, that'd be very interesting time for us.
So what Chee is saying is stay tuned. We'll keep you informed.
Okay, so I think that's it for today. We'll let you get back to your day. I'd like to thank Jason for his time, an expert insight on AEO. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day, everyone. We'll reach out to you shortly. Bye.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and thank you, Chee. Thank you, Trustpilot.